Well, a lot of people are discussing Kamala Harris' economic plan. And there's one topic in particular that a lot of people are debating each other about online, and that is the $25,000 down payment for first time home buyers. So that's the one I do want to focus on, especially since it was not too long ago that I was a first time home buyer. So I'm very familiar with the home buying process. And I want to also get to the core issue of what is missed from this discussion. So, first and foremost, I am not against helping people purchase a home. I think the home prices are ridiculously expensive. I purchased my home, I think it was 2020. It was still kind of during the height of the pandemic, and the interest rates were incredibly low. I can tell you from personal experience, and I've been watching the home prices in my area. If I would have waited even the next year, I don't believe I would have been able to purchase a home because the prices started to increase dramatically. I can tell you today, I would not be able to purchase a home in this area, in the Boston area. There's no way I would be able to do it today. That's how expensive homes are now compared to 2020. So let's go ahead and get started with this announcement about that 25K down payment for home ownership. We're going to bring in this clip here.
Our work includes, for example, like let's have metrics. Let's say, for example, we know the history of Black home ownership. We know the history of bias and laws that prevented equal access to that opportunity. We have now proposed that if you are the child of parents who, or you were raised in a family where the folks who raised you were not homeowners, when you want to go buy a home, you will be entitled to a $25,000 grant toward down payment for a home.
So notice there's a lot of applause there. A lot of people like D.L. Hughley and Roland Martin are really excited about this. But some of us that are a part of not just the Black community, but people that are what we would call the working poor, not the middle class, have been very skeptical about this particular policy. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. But I did notice when she started talking about this, she seemed a little nervous when she started talking about the inequities that we have in this country. That was just something that I noticed. Let me let her continue here.
Again, acknowledging the realities of it all. If your parents owned a home and then you as their child say, I want to go buy, then your parents will likely have the opportunity and ability to say, honey, you don't have to go take out that big loan. I'm going to take some equity out of my home to help you with that down payment. Sure.
So that is one of the problems, that misconception there, that if your parents previously owned a home, that they have the ability to take out equity on their current home to help you with the down payment on your home. And you know what I thought about? I thought about the '08 housing crisis. I thought about all of the people that lost their homes during the '08 housing crisis. Now, what if you are one of those people that either lost your home in 2008 because of predatory lending? We all remember what was happening there during the housing crisis. What if you were one of those people that did own a home, but you lost it because you fell prey to those predatory lenders? As we all know, Barack Obama did not punish Wall Street. He decided to punish the American people instead of giving those people their homes back or giving them back the amount that they had paid on those homes or something to help those people. So what if you were one of those people? Well, technically, you are not a first-time home buyer. What if your parent was one of those people? Technically, you would not be a first-generation home buyer. So something that I was thinking about, there's a lot of red tape around this particular policy that Kamala Harris is pushing. And I'm thinking about how it is going to impact more importantly, the working poor. There's a lot of talk about uplifting the middle class from her and Harris, but I believe a lot of times the working poor are left out. The working poor, the people who are working two jobs because they're making minimum wage at both of those jobs, but they don't have, let's say, a college degree to get a job that will pay more money. Those people, the people that don't make enough to obviously save up for a down payment on a home, but at the same time, they don't make too little to fall below that poverty line so that they can get some type of government assistance. I'm talking about that particular group of people. And there's a lot of people that are part of that category. You may not know them personally necessarily, but you may pass them every day. It could be the person that's making your Starbucks coffee. It could be the person that's greeting you at that drive-in window at Dunkin' Donuts. It could be the person that's selling you shoes at the mall. I'm talking about the people that are working retail jobs and people that are working restaurant jobs, which a lot of people in this country have those particular positions. I was reading one time before that the average middle-aged woman in this country works a retail job. What about those people? Let's continue.
And that's how intergenerational wealth works. But if you start with nothing, how are we going to give people those opportunities? Right. And so it's about acknowledgement and then pushing through the actual policies that are not just about lip service, but actually making a difference.
So this is something I think people need to pay close attention to. Again, like I said, this program in particular, it is for people who are not just a first-time home buyer, but first-generation home buyers, meaning that your parents did not own a home. And there are many of us whose parents may have owned a home but they lost that home because they were laid off, because of what they went through during the '08 housing crisis, or maybe you were that person that lost your home during the '08 housing crisis. Now, we all have to remember that it was companies like BlackRock that bought those foreclosed homes and decided to renovate them and increase the price so that even if you got to a point in your life where you wanted to get your house back, you would not be able to do so because you didn't make the income to be able to purchase that home again. And you also have to remember that I told you that Kamala Harris has 2 BlackRock alum working with her on her economic policy. So this plan that Kamala has come up with, it's almost as if they are totally disregarding the people that were affected during the '08 housing crisis. And a lot of those people were Black people. So we have to remember that. People who do not have the means to purchase a home today as well. Let's dive into this a little bit more, and we're going to really break this down. The announcement was here. Harris to propose a $25,000 in down payment support for first-time home buyers. Now, that is the headline, which a lot of people read, but they did not read the details. And I noticed this on social media. It goes on to say here, the campaign is vowing that during its first term, the Harris-Walz administration would provide working families who have paid their rent on time for 2 years. Let's highlight this part here. A lot of people didn't read this part. Working families who have paid their rent on time and are buying their first home up to $25,000 in down payment assistance with more generous support for first generation homeowners. Now, let's dive into this 2-year rent payment. The problem that you run into is that a lot of people that are working poor, that group I was just telling you about, it is not uncommon for them to have missed or have a late rent payment. Now, she's talking about over the course of 2 years. I know people that have been laid off left and right, going all the way back since the start of the pandemic. And people who are laid off, they may run into that situation where they may miss a rental payment. It is not uncommon. I know, like back in the day, especially during the '08 housing crisis, I know there was a time or two when I was late on my rent because of the economic situation, because of what was happening with the housing crisis and people being laid off and et cetera, and all those types of things. So for people who are wondering, a lot of you will look at me and you'll say, well, she has a master's degree and she owns a house, and we'll get into all that. But a lot of you don't know the backstory. A lot of you don't realize that I was a part of that group that was working poor, particularly during '08. I was a part of that group that worked two jobs, that barely made ends meet. And all it takes is for one unexpected expense for you to end up late, whether it's on a rental payment or whether it's on your utility bill or whether it's on, any other bill, credit card bill or other bills that you have, or God forbid, medical bills as well. That's all it takes is an unexpected expense that you have to take care of to put you behind. So in a sense, when she talks about people who have paid their rent on time for 2 years, that doesn't apply to a lot of people that are working poor. That will apply to a lot of people that are part of the middle class. And this is something that I've noticed in particular with presidential candidates. There is this big focus on the middle class, and not saying that there should not be a focus on the middle class. There should. But there is one group in particular that I feel is not being discussed, and that is the working poor. That group of people that don't make enough to be able to save money to put a down payment on a home, but they don't make too little that they are able to receive government assistance. And that is a lot of people in this country. Let's continue here. A lot of people are not too happy with the term first generation. Some people saw this and they said, oh, that means she's going to be giving this to migrants. Well, I just want to correct something here. Migrants would not qualify for this. That's not how it works. You still have to get a loan from the bank. We can get into that a little bit later, but they wouldn't qualify for it. However, some people are pointing out the fact that it will apply to some people who have immigrated here, which I could see that happening. But technically, the term first generation, as it was used for me when I was in college, I was a first generation college student. That doesn't mean that my parents immigrated here. It meant that I was the first person in my family to attend college. However, there are first generation college students that also are first generation Americans, and their parents did immigrate here. But I just wanted to let people know it can mean both things. Now, let's continue because there's more that I want to add to this as well. In a preview statement obtained by ABC News, the campaign says many Americans work hard at their jobs, save, and pay their rent on time month after month, but they can't save enough after paying their rent and other bills to save for a down payment, denying them a shot at owning a home and building wealth. And I agree that a lot of people just can't save up the money for the down payment. But I will also tell you, and you'll see this when we get to the numbers, that $25,000 for a down payment doesn't get you far in the United States when you're trying to purchase a home today. I know if I remember correctly, even for my home in 2020, when the interest rates were exceptionally low at that point in time, even the down payment was more than $25,000. So people have to understand that. I don't want people to jump to these conclusions and just think I'm going to get this $25,000 payment here for a down payment on a home and I'm going to be all set. No. And when we run through the numbers, you'll see what I'm talking about. Let's continue on. It goes a little bit further and it says, they start to expand the supply. They're going to start to expand the supply of entry-level homes. They will, during their first term, provide working families who have paid their rent on time. There's that on time again for 2 years and are buying their first home up to $25,000 in down payment assistance with more generous support for first generation home owners, meaning that, again, your parents did not own a home. You will get even more. Now, notice how they frame this. They say this is a down payment assistance. So that is them acknowledging that that is not going to be enough to cover a down payment. See, a lot of people are skipping over this and they're not reading between the lines. It goes on to say here that the administration proposed providing $25,000 in down payment assistance for 400,000 first generation home buyers or home buyers whose parents don't own a home. That's that first generation part there as well. and a $10,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers. This plan will significantly simplify and expand the reach of down payment assistance, allowing over 1 million first-time buyers per year, including first-generation home buyers, to get the funds they need to buy a house when they're ready to buy it. So, look, I don't know. There have been a lot of promises that have been made. And I don't care who the presidential candidate is, but if they're running the Democratic Party, Republican Party, I always pause with this because Obama made a lot of promises when he was running for president. I think we all remember, right? Biden made a lot of promises when he was running for president. And so I see a lot of people getting excited and getting their hopes up, right? I think the Harris campaign needs to explain how they would do this, how they would accomplish this. And another thing I want to talk about is the process, the home buying process that I've gone through. I will tell you this much. Regardless if you have the $25K for the down payment or not, the reality is you have to get approved by the bank. And in order to get approved by the bank, you have to have a certain credit score. So your credit will still matter. So this is something I think a lot of people may not understand if they haven't gone through this process. As someone who has, I will tell you this. You have to get approved by the bank in order for the bank to give you a loan. That's how it works. So if you don't have the credit score or the credit score that the bank is looking for, regardless if you're a first-time home buyer or not, you are not going to qualify for that $25K in down payment assistance. That's not me trying to be snarky. That's just the reality of the situation. You have to get approved by the bank. So what they could do is help people with that previous process I just mentioned to you, getting approved by the bank. Because like I said, no bank approval, no bank loan, no home ownership. This is where I say again, this is going to benefit more people that are part of the middle class, not those that are working poor. Because if you're looking at the credit scores, the reality is the numbers show you a lot of the people that are working poor do not have the credit score or may not have good enough credit to qualify to get the loan from the bank. If you're looking at the numbers again, that is going to impact a lot of people who are African American in this country. So when we talk about people like Roland Martin saying on Twitter that this is going to greatly help African Americans, not really when you look at the numbers. Again, if you are middle class and you have that credit score, yes, I think this could really help you. But the reality is, if you don't have the credit score, you're not going to get the loan. And if you don't have enough money to save up to pay for the rest of that down payment, you're not going to be able to get the house. So let's look at those numbers. And we got to give a huge shout out to Reggie from Boston, because Reggie broke it all down. Does Kamala Harris housing assistance plan go far enough for Black America? I looked up some numbers, sources below. Guys, shout out Reggie, because he went really deep into this. He even made a spreadsheet we're going to show you as well. First thing I did was look at median home values. These are median home prices for each state and Washington, D.C. for 2023. Let's use my state of Massachusetts as an example. So Reggie and I are both in the Boston area. Massachusetts, for example, median home value over $600,000. Now, how many of you can afford a $600,000 house? When you're looking at a mortgage for a house that costs that much, your mortgage is going to be over $3,000 a month. How many of you can afford that? Okay. All right, let's go on. Let's continue. Again, like I told you, the prices were lower in 2020. So let's continue on. Next, I looked up median Black household income by state. Massachusetts Black families made $63,000, a little over $63,000 in 2022, right? So $63,000 as a salary, that's not enough for you to get a home that's over $600,000. It's just not. Let's continue. And we'll go into the numbers. I don't have to pull up the article because he made a spreadsheet. So we'll show you that as well. I didn't see 2003 numbers, so I wanted to find out about what we would have made that year. According to this study, wages grew about 4.4% on average from 2022 to 2023, if I'm reading this correctly. So Massachusetts families made around a little bit over $65,000 in 2023. Let's go on. Most people consider your household to be cost burden if you spend more than 1/3 of your income on housing. For Black families in Massachusetts, that threshold would be around $1,832 per month. Everybody see this? Let's go on. For many leaders, in order to avoid private mortgage insurance, which is the PMI, a home buyer must have a 20% for the down payment. For Massachusetts, that comes out to be over $120,000. And Reggie is correct. These are the things that are not being explained to people. So, and it's not just Massachusetts. I'm going to show you other states too. So if you get the $25,000 in down payment assistance, that's great. But what I want you to understand is that's nowhere near enough, particularly if you live in my state, for you to get that house. Now, if you don't want to avoid the PMI, you can do the first time home buyer program, which is what I did. But even during doing that program, I still had a down payment. I believe it was a little over $30,000. And that was in 2020. The houses cost more now. My home is worth a lot more now. If I were to put it on the market, it's ridiculously overpriced now. So I don't want people to think that this is just going to be the saving grace. Again, it's great to help people be able to obtain home ownership, but people have to know all the details. He goes on to say an FHA loan needs at least 3.5% down. In the case of Massachusetts, that's $21,000. Let's assume the federal government gives you a grant for that. So let's go on. Let's assume that Kamala Harris grants $25,000 in extra support for first generation home buyers. Adding this to FHA, since Harris doesn't state clearly whether the down payment assistance is instead of or in addition to grants available under FHA, clarity matters. So if I look confused, blame her. Anyway, we are at a total of $46,000 in down payment assistance. So let's just walk with this. And this is important because FHA has different rules. Like, for example, there are some sellers that do not accept an FHA loan. Sometimes it's just them trying to be greedy. If they have a buyer that's willing to give them a 20% down payment, some sellers are more likely to go with that person instead of going with the person that has obtained an FHA loan. A lot of it's just greed. There are also people that are buying homes, particularly here in Massachusetts, where they're offering all cash. We're talking about foreign investors that are coming into Massachusetts and they're like, I'm going to buy this house and I'm going to pay all cash. That does happen. So if you get that person and you have a person that has a FHA loan, sometimes the seller, if they're trying to be greedy, they'll just go with the person that's going to give them all cash. It happens. I'm trying to tell you how stressful and difficult the home buying process is today compared to how it was like 10 years ago. And it was stressful in 2020. So it's even more stressful now because the homes are more expensive. There are people now even willing to forego the housing inspection, which, by the way, I do not recommend. Never forego a housing inspection. No matter how great a house looks on the outside and in the inside, there could be problems with that house inside the walls, with the plumbing. You never know with the electrical units. You never know that until something happens and it goes wrong. And I've heard of people doing this, and I think it's a really bad idea. So don't ever do that. He goes on to say here, Under a Harris administration, a Black family in Massachusetts is still $74,000 short of a down payment that will not trigger PMI. Over $554,000 still has to be financed. I looked at interest rates earlier today, a 30-year fixed rate at 6.54% when I checked. So like I said, Reggie really did his homework. I used Zillow mortgage calculator and plugged in the numbers. With principal, interest, property tax, homeowners insurance, and PMI, a Black family in Massachusetts would need to be able to pay the bank $4,819 a month. So there we go. It is higher than what it was in 2020. I don't pay that. And this is just what I had predicted. How many of you can afford to pay $4,819 a month? Let's continue. Of course, everyone's property tax, insurance rates, and interest rates will differ slightly or greatly, but generally speaking, $4,819 represents 88% of the median household income for Black households in Massachusetts. He said, I give up there. I ran the numbers for every single state and Washington, D.C. By these numbers I ran, the typical Black family will not be able to afford home ownership anywhere in the U.S. under a Harris administration. In every state, we will be cost burdened. Every state. So let's take a look at the numbers. And by the way, it's not just Black families. Like, again, working poor white people, this is going to be difficult for you as well. So he ran those numbers and he created this spreadsheet here. And I want to make sure I can make it a little bit so we can see the numbers. Okay. So it's in alphabetical order. So in Alabama, the median home prices by state, 2023, $275,000. The Black household income in that state in 2022 was $40,774. So make sure I'm showing you everything. Yearly income, we're not going to do every state, but I want to show you some of them. Yearly income adjusted for 4.4% wage growth, that would be $42,568, right? So there's the increase there. And then your monthly income would be $3,547. The yearly cost burden threshold, which is 1/3 of the income, would be $14,189.35. And then I want to show you here. He shows the PMI, all of this stuff. But I want to show you, let's get to the totals. In Alabama, the total assistance under Harris, let's say $34,625, above or below the PMI threshold. You see, this is in the red, $20,375. Amount to finance under Harris, $240,375, right? Monthly payment, mortgage, taxes, insurance, and PMI at 6.54%. That's $2,099. Monthly payment as the percentage of the income, 59%. And Alabama is one of the cheaper ones. So let's go to a state where it's not as cheap. Make sure I can go all the way over. Click on this here. And we're going to go to Massachusetts. We'll come up to Massachusetts because I want to show you guys what I'm talking about. So when we go to Massachusetts, you can see here, again, that average home over $600,000, which I told you would be the case. That income in 2022, over 63,000. After the wage increase, over 65,000. And then we're just going to go all the way over to the totals again. And I forgot the yellow column. Total assistance under Harris, $46,000. And then you'll see here the amount that you'll have to finance, $554,000. And your monthly payment, $4,819. So the point that Reggie is making, which is one that I recognized as well, and I've been trying to explain this to people, is that giving people the $25,000 for the down payment assistance, that is nice. But the problem that you run into is that, number one, you have to get approved by the bank. Let's not forget that. Number two, which means you need the credit, etc. Number two, because homes are so much more expensive today, that $25,000 doesn't get you as far as you think it does. And you still may have to put some of your own money towards that, which means you will have to have savings. That's going to exclude a lot of people that are working poor. And three, once you get to the totals and you see how much you have to finance, and then you see how much you will pay monthly, you're going to realize that this plan here that Kamala Harris has is mainly going to help people that are part of the middle class. And that is not a progressive policy. When we talked about progressive policies, we talked about housing for all. So it's going to help people that are middle class, that have good credit, and are first generation home buyers. But it's not going to help people that are working poor. Then we need to get to the core problem, which I also feel like isn't being addressed. And I tweeted this: this doesn't fix the core issue. People can't purchase homes because they're not making enough money to pay the mortgage or qualify for a loan from the bank. You can build 1 trillion homes, but until you increase wages, this will continue to be an issue. So the problem with this as well is that it doesn't get to the core issue. The reason why people can't afford to buy a home is because we don't make enough money to be able to purchase a home. Because yes, it is true. BlackRock, some of these companies, private equity, they've been purchasing single family homes, renovating them, they jack up the price. Yes, that's true. That's a real thing. And I've talked about that for quite some time. But that's been going on for decades. So there's that. So how do you fix this problem? You have to make it illegal for these corporations to buy single family homes. You have to outlaw private equity from home ownership. If you don't do that, BlackRock is still going to continue to buy these homes. That's one thing that needs to happen. The second thing that needs to happen is that people need to make a living wage in this country, because no matter how much down payment assistance someone gives you, if you're not making a living wage, are you going to be able to pay that monthly payment? I give you $25,000 in down payment assistance. Are you going to be able to pay $4,819 a month? Do you see the problem? You still have the salary issue. You still have the wage problem. And the bank is not just going to give you a loan to buy a house because Kamala Harris gave you $25,000 in down payment assistance. The bank isn't just going to give you that loan because you got that assistance for the down payment if you cannot prove to the bank that you can make that mortgage payment every month. That is a big problem. So again, it's great that there is this need to try to help to give people some type of assistance with home ownership. But the reality is this is going to leave a lot of people out that are working poor. And this isn't going to benefit as many Black people as you think it's going to when you get down to all the issues you got to deal with the bank and being able to make that mortgage payment. And number 3, these presidents have made a lot of promises. So there's no guarantee that Kamala Harris is even going to do this at all. Sounds like this could be something just to try to get you to come out and vote and support. We don't know. What I do know is that she is a part of the Biden administration, and both her and Joe Biden made a lot of promises that they did not fulfill. And the other issue is, if this needs to be passed by Congress, it's not going to happen. So, not to be a Debbie Downer or anything, but I saw a lot of people getting excited about this that were not familiar with the home buying process. And because I was familiar with that, I said, no, I have to break this down. And we got to talk about what really happens during the home buying process. It's a tedious process. It can be a frustrating process, particularly because there's so much competition. But at the same time, it's important that you know what you're getting yourself into. And what I would hate to see happen, I would hate to see people fall for this, just like they fell for a lot of the things that Barack Obama said. It is very important that we have to read between the lines, and we have to look at all these extra layers. And personally, I don't think that anyone should be punished either if they were late on a rent payment in the past 2 years. We have come out of a pandemic. I know a lot of people that were laid off during the pandemic, businesses closed during the pandemic because governors locked down the states, or certain states were locked down. Some people are just now getting back on their feet. So I think it's a penalty in a way if you had a late payment and now you don't qualify for this. So there's that as well. We need housing for everyone in this country, and we have a lot of money in this country, and we can make it happen.